Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar featuring our guest presenter, Jennifer Crandall from Safe Food en Route. We're also joined by Chris Reno from PJRFSI. Please note that all attendees are going to be muted throughout the duration of today's webinar. If you have any questions for the presenter or for PJR, we encourage you to use the designated question tab within your GoToWebinar control panel. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer and we can get started.
Hey, hello. Thank you again to Perry Johnson Registrars for letting me be a presenter. So I'm really excited to share with you a little bit more about FSMA and how I've seen it become more than just a regulatory system. So I think there's a couple of housekeeping items that Chris might want to cover real quick. So if you want to jump in, Chris, and talk about housekeeping. I actually,
hey, thanks, Jennifer.
Parker just did it. I apologize.
Throughout the presentation today, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the questions tab. We'll try to save about 10 to 15 minutes at the conclusion of the presentation to answer anything. If for some reason we don't get to them, we'll definitely follow up with you at the conclusion of today's meeting. Give us about 24 hours after the conclusion for us to process this, and then we'll also get all the slides sent out to everyone as well. So without further ado, take it away, Jen.
All right. This is an update of a little bit about me. I'm the founder and CEO of Safe Food en Route. It's a food safety consulting company. I'll share a little bit more in a slide following. It's been 26 years in the industry, so I've been working in both the private and publicly held companies. And I just love being able to provide scientific and regulatory guidance to small and mid-sized companies, and that's our target industry. So we are making reliable corporate level food safety programs accessible to everyone. That comes from a lot of the work that I used to do at Kroger and just seeing what I feel like a lot of the companies needed. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about beyond regulations. A little bit more in-depth background of myself, just so that you can get to know me a little bit more for those that have not had heard me speak before. I have a Purdue food science degree. I got that in '98, and I worked in manufacturing for 8 years after that, just in various positions like production supervision and management, leadership, quality assurance. I wrote HACCP plans. I wrote some food safety plans. I was not in manufacturing at the time that GFSI started, so I'm going to age myself a little bit, but GFSI started with larger companies. They started implementing it after I had left manufacturing and went to corporate. I worked at corporate Kroger for 12 years, and I did 4 different positions there. Most of it was managing supplier compliance and vetting suppliers for Kroger. I did spend 3 years in global sourcing doing compliance, but also understanding how direct imports work and looking at the business side of logistics and that sort of thing with different suppliers. And then I came back, I saw the light and came back to the corporate food technology department for a little bit longer and became the business lead in software development that we were working on for the supplier hub. And I spent most of the time working to make sure that we were meeting the compliance of the Foreign Supplier Verification Program rule. I am an FSVP expert and have been doing that since. And also, I'm just proud to say that I've recently received the Purdue University Distinguished Ag Alumni Award for Food Science and also their Outstanding Alumni Award for 2024. And I'm currently serving as a board member on Land Betterment Corporation and on Omnibus Incorporated. And the little Clockwork Certified Partner is just a new certification that we have got. I will tell you a little bit more about that in the presentation. So we do offer, Safe Food en Route offers several different services. I'm not trying to make this an advertisement. I just want to make sure that you're aware of what we do here. We spend a lot of time in supplier compliance management solutions, helping companies meet the FSVP regulations. We also, I dropped the F on that as well. Sometimes we do domestic work as well for companies and just manage and monitor their suppliers for them. We also do food safety consulting and just meeting regulatory requirements and GFSI schemes. We do training and label reviews. We're also now partnered with one company called Culture Assurance Group, and they help us with software services such as the A3S readiness assessment tool through Aperidasoft. And then there's another one called Nesys, which helps with quality management systems. And we are currently in build mode with that. We also do, for the private equity space, food safety diligence, and the run like clockwork part is now part of our offerings, and it's more on the operational efficiencies. So now that I've had a chance to get to know you, you've gotten a chance to get to know me a little bit, I'm going to hand it over to Chris to run the poll so I can get to know you a little bit more as well, and understand who's in my audience.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. So we really like to ask this poll question at the beginning, because a lot of what we do and say later on, we're able to tailor to, you know, the specific audience that we've got. So if you would take just a minute and answer this. We'll give it about 15-20 seconds here, and then we'll close the poll. So far we're out to about a 60% food safety quality professional, 25% manager director label, and 16 to 18% other. So looks like we've got about 80% of the audience voted. So let's go ahead and close the poll.
Great.
And yep, so final numbers: 58% food safety quality professional, 25% manager director, and 18% other.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for letting me get to know you a little bit more. I always like to understand who I'm talking to so that I can cater a little bit more to, you know, who is in the audience and speak more at your level than you know, the broad group, if I can. So today's agenda, we're going to cover talking a little bit about enhancing food safety culture, operational efficiencies and waste reduction, innovation in food safety technologies, building consumer trust and confidence, and then kind of like buttoning it all up with the global food safety harmonization. The Food Safety Modernization Act pulls all these together. It transcends its role as a mere regulatory framework and serves more as a transformative force in the food industry. So we're going to look at how it enhances all these different areas. So I've shared several times a lot about the background of FSMA, so I'm not going to go into it. And FSMA, for those that are listening, I call it FSMA, but that's the Food Safety Modernization Act. But I do want to call out a couple of things here, or a few things. One is the high-level requirement of the legislation still states that all entities and types of companies that are covered by FDA are covered under this Food Safety Modernization Act in some fashion, and they have either modified rules, and you know, there are some exceptions, but the key that I like to call out is that everyone, all entities, foreign and domestic, all different types of companies, manufacturers, processors, packers, and holders of foods, and including shippers, they're covered under this regulation. And everyone must analyze if it's reasonably foreseeable hazards, require preventative controls, and then if hazards do exist, that they ensure that preventive controls are implemented and exist to control those hazards. So again, it's like everyone has to look at hazards. And what I like to say is something that I used to hear, we used to say it at Kroger a lot, is know your suppliers and know your products. So we'll touch a little bit on that later, but that's the gist of it, in my opinion. And I like to just make sure everybody understands, like, there is hardly anyone that is exempt fully to the rules that are in place. So what are the rules? There are 10 associated rules and 5 associated programs. So the produce safety rule, the pre-harvest of agriculture water was just recently released as well. That's part of produce safety. You have the accredited third-party certification, food traceability, which is FSMA 204, foreign supplier verification for importers of foods or for human and animals, laboratory accreditations for analysis of foods, which is LAAF. You might see that occasionally. Mitigation strategies to protect food against intentional adulteration. A lot of times we shorten that to the intentional adulteration rule. And then, of course, some of our favorites are preventive controls for human foods, preventive controls for animal foods. There's sanitary transportation, and I'm just reading them down if you haven't figured it out yet. Accredited third-party certification program. That's a program, it's voluntary. The foreign supplier verification, there's a list of participants now, so they have that included in the associated rules and programs listed. So that's a list that you can get on the FDA site. Foreign supplier verification programs, which is the importer portal for record submissions. Now there's a location for that. The laboratory accreditation for analysis of foods. Again, oh, I double said that one. So that's the LAAF. I accidentally doubled it. And then the voluntary qualified importer program, which is VQIP. And that one is related to foreign supplier verification program rule, but it's a little bit more robust and something that is voluntarily done, that you can pay a little additional money to the FDA to get your program proactively looked at instead of reactively whenever you get in some kind of inspection. So let's go into enhancing food safety culture a little bit more. Last year, I discussed 5 ways that GFSI enhances food safety culture. I'm going to bring them up again because I think that they're very similar principles of how FSMA has enhanced it as well. And so a lot of it is looking at it from the vision and the mission of a company. So top down, starting point from companies. You make sure that you have trained people and consistency throughout the organization. So standardization, SOPs, that sort of thing. Ability to review and assess hazards. So kind of like an adaptability piece. So keep an alert with trends and making sure that you are adjusting your programs. And then doing that hazard analysis and risk awareness, just staying involved, knowing what's going on, and then making sure that you adapt your program to it. It really does start with that vision and mission. And both FSMA and GFSI have great ways to enforce those practices, ensure that various components are covered. And then what both entities suggest that for a successful food safety management program is really critical to have leadership support that, and it is driven from both ends of the organization. So it can't just be the food safety quality assurance team leading, it has to be the entire company. It needs to be part of the core value of the company. And last year in a couple of presentations, I did share a kind of like a combination of the Merriam-Webster definition of culture, and I overlaid food safety into it. And this was what I had written at that time. So it's beliefs, social forms, and material traits of the workplace that share attitudes, values, goals, and practices that support food safety. These set of food safety driven values are in place in every practice of the company and are an integrated pattern for all employees. So again, it's not just the FSQA team, the food safety quality assurance team leading this, it is everyone in the organization managing it. So FSMA really focuses on making sure that that is a core value and they are monitoring food safety culture. And you see that evidence in the new era of smarter food safety. And this was, we talked about this last year as well. It's been a trending topic, but in July of 2020, the commissioner of the FDA at the time announced that the blueprint looks like these 4 elements. And so you have the tech-enhanced traceability, smarter tools for prevention and response, new business models, and food safety culture. And tracking food more rapidly in minutes is a key part of this requirement. And that's evident in the recently published FSMA 204 rule, which is the traceability rule. And that the goal of being able to trace high-risk foods that might be contaminated and be able to trace them to the source of the contamination within minutes. And if you've been in the food industry for a while, you know that we have not been able to do this in minutes. We've been improving our traceability programs, and a lot of the food safety quality professionals on here probably say, well, I can do it within a couple of hours, and we've been doing that work. However, being able to do it within seconds has not been something we've been able to do, and the FDA is really trying to shift us that direction. The tech-enabled traceability is talking about some of the things like blockchain, and which blockchain isn't as much a buzzword, but it is in the background of a lot of things, and it's the ability to be able to have authentic data at your fingertips. It's been proven and verified that it is accurate by a third party of some sort, and then allowed to be public information or public to the supply chain thread that is looking at it. So it also includes other smarter tools and approaches for prevention and outbreak, such as predictive analytics, using artificial intelligence and machine learning to strengthen the agency's review of the imported foods. And note that it's talking a little bit about the agency's ability to review it, but I also would encourage that this should apply also to companies as well. There are new business models and retail modernization that we have now implemented, especially since COVID has affected us, where many of us started ordering food to our homes, and normally prepared food transportation has kind of been limited at least in the United States to more like pizza delivery. There were not that many delivery options, and now business models include different types of Uber pickup, and then there's delivery from the stores. So that there's just a lot of things that need to be explored, but also direct to consumer options as well need to be explored. But this is an area that the FDA is still pushing for. And then finally, that food safety culture, as I mentioned, and that entails keeping food workers safe and educating consumers as well as food workers on safe handling practices. And so now the FDA mandates that food handlers are trained in food safety throughout the food chain. And that's not that we didn't have that before, but it has definitely been more of a focus with food safety culture being part of this new era of smarter food safety. Okay, so I somehow think I lost graphics, so I'm going to try to flip through them real quick so that we can see them here. So last year, again, we covered a little bit of that food safety culture, and I wanted just to kind of reiterate, you have a culture whether you realize it or not. You have global supply chain means, which means we need to be doing food safety throughout the entire globe. And so we have a little bit more representation from other countries that may have different types of food safety practices than we do. Leaders and managers throughout every organization own it, whether they know it or not. So I say whether they know it or not because, and it's the same thing with intentional culture, is because you may not realize that you're an example when you're walking through a facility. And so if you're a manager that's on here, because we did have that breakdown of the food safety quality people, and then you have managers, if you just run on the plant floor for 5 seconds because you need to do something really quick, and then you run back off and you don't follow the appropriate GMP programs when you do it, you're telling the workers that either, one, I'm above these types of rules and policies, or two, they don't have to follow them. And so that it really does send a message. So, you just have to understand as a leader, as a manager, that you own food safety as much as everybody else. So it's very important to represent it as an example, do all of the things that are requested when you enter the production floor. Also, regular communication, education, and metrics, teamwork, and personal accountability are vital to advancing food safety everywhere. So, this is a non-compete kind of area in the entire production supply chain. You know, food safety is something that's important throughout the entire thing. So it's not something that you hold tight. You need to have metrics to work towards it. You want to have teamwork. And these are things that FSMA helps produce a little bit more of that proactive accountability in the organization. And then personnel and leadership skills move the needle in food safety. And the way they do this is just adaptability and hazard awareness, staying kind of aware of when the process flow changes, when new equipment is added, whenever there's a new employee and you need to do training. So it's much more about you know, how the leadership is engaged in handling and managing change in the facility as much as it is the food safety quality team. So I want to pause here because, again, like, want to think about how enhancing culture of food safety has happened throughout your organization, but also recognizing that FSMA has helped give us not just, it's given us kind of a regulatory requirement to do it, and it's helping a lot of companies manage FSMA in a different way. So manage food safety in a different way. So I'd love to get everyone to just reflect on how FSMA has helped your company. And I give you a few options in the poll that Chris will jump in and manage for you.
Let's get this next one launched here.
Yeah, thank you.
How has the Food Safety Modernization Act helped to enhance your programs? And we'll take just a few seconds here.
And as you fill this out, and if there's something that falls in the other bucket, I'd love for you to pop it into the chat just to share with us what that other might be if you decide that you're selecting other.
Yeah, so let's just give this a few more minutes. But Jen, one of the things that you mentioned briefly ago was about, you know, managers running out onto the floor and, you know, running back up. And you know, it goes for managers, owners, sometimes sales guys, right? I've been in a lot of factory settings and seen it, you know, numerous times. And you mentioned that there sometimes can be a perception either that I'm above this or that it's not, it doesn't have to be followed.
Right.
I was wondering if you see that in things like jewelry and watches, you know, the really simple things that sometimes are just overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. It's usually those type of things. So it's, you know, you need to put a lab coat on and they don't put a lab coat on, or to cover themselves, or don't grab the hairnet as they walk in to the area because they think, oh, I'm not walking onto the actual production floor. So yeah, it's absolutely can happen in that method. Jewelry, I used to work at a company that the owner of the company would walk through and keep his like gold bracelet, like he had a really pretty gold braided bracelet. And I was just furious about it that he would do that. But I will also say that same facility, I had an FDA, like an FDA inspector that was inspecting our facility, and they were wearing false eyelashes and fake nails and walking in. So it was like not just leaders, but people who represent the industry that should know better. So it's just like, it's so easy to just ignore something real quick. And I mean, I've been just as guilty of it. So I did it early in my career too. And I'm like, oh, I just got to do this real quick. I'm going to walk from this place to this place. And I won't even walk on the production floor. It's just an office to an office. But that is still inappropriate behavior, and really need to be working on not doing that anymore. So
perfect.
What's
so
the breakdown look like?
Yeah, we've got the results in. We've got 40% for better supplier programs, followed up by 36% for improved and developed employee training.
Oh, nice. Okay, so it's really enhancing that.
Others. So I'm going to be interested to see what we get in the chat. I'll share those with you as they come up.
Yeah, it's interesting that reward programs for employees wasn't selected yet. So maybe there were a few, but and maybe if you couldn't select both, you would have selected both. But I have seen some companies doing reward programs for employees to help improve and enhance the culture. I think that's looked at more on the GFSI space than maybe in FSMA, but I still think FSMA is leading us that way as well. Okay, well, let's jump into the next, and we'll talk a little bit about operational efficiencies and how to do, like, how it affects waste reduction. And a lot of this is tied to how FSMA 204, the traceability rule, is requiring that we have significant improvements in our ability to produce data to the government upon request in a rapid and concise way. So that rule is looking at end-to-end traceability throughout the supply chain so they can quickly identify and manage food safety issues. I mentioned before, better risk management, and also improve speed and accuracy of recalls, which leads to the second bullet of enhanced recall processes. So reducing the waste and downtime that is associated with a recall because you have more accurate data, you're tracing to the source faster. There's contamination reduction and limited scope of products because you can identify quicker. And I'm thinking more of like how ingredients are managed and raw materials, where you might be able to isolate it more, you know, in a more rapid way, what ingredient is causing the problem. It's not saying that you're not going to have to do a root cause analysis to figure this out, but hopefully with the data being a little bit digitized, you know, more digitized and easily gathered, that you'll be able to have some cost savings. And that will help also with some brand reputation as well. And then it really, we're already starting to see improved supply chain coordination, whether it's accurate tracking and forecasting. It's going to be able to reduce overproduction and spoilage. So the hope is that you would be connecting the dots between raw materials all the way to finished product and into the retailers. So this is an opportunity when you kind of think of a SWOT analysis on it. So we have a little bit of a weakness when you think of recalls and how fast we've been able to do mock recall exercises, be able to produce data quickly, because we're still, as an industry, in the food industry specifically, shifting from paper to digital form. But also, you know, the faster that we can do that exercise in a recall, there's opportunity there from the SWOT perspective that you can do better inventory management. And so, you know, if you have systems from different entities speaking to each other, you're going to be able to accurately forecast and be able to say, hey, they're running low on this, so I need to produce this, or vice versa, you know, where you're like, I need to write a purchase order to get this. And so there's a little bit more of forecasting there. That's an opportunity. And then that overproduction and spoilage reduction, you know, that can happen in different ways in different facilities. It just depends on what you move. But I can say for sure, you know, I used to work in a couple of different ice cream facilities, and you know, right now is when they're revving up to, or they probably did the last 2 months, revving up their inventory to try to cover all of the summer. And they're trying to predict, are we going to have enough ice cream to last through the busy season, but not have too much that at the end of the season, you know, especially if you have specialty flavors or seasonal flavors, that there's not so much left that you can't sell it. And then you're sitting on that inventory and not able to do anything with it unless you run a sale or something like that. So hopefully these types of traceability systems can help you enhance that as well. And that also, again, kind of goes back to ensured, safe, high quality product to the consumer as well, because you're one, not overproducing. So from a quality perspective, like ice cream, the longer, the older it is, the more chance it has for kind of the freeze thaw things to happen and have ice crystals or something like that. And a lot of food has that, where the longer it is, you know, in its shelf life, the more likely it could have some quality issues, because a lot of times the shelf life is related to quality issues. It will also help, and I, you know, just thinking about it with the FIFO, the first in, first out, there's a lot of technology that's out there. We're going to cover that in the next section about some of the technologies that are out there to help. But FSMA is really enforcing to focus on that traceability, which gives us those opportunities and justifications to upgrade these systems, right? So improving our inventory management systems, improving our supply chain, our purchase order systems. It is a justification at this point. So I am going to stop here again. I know it's really fast for another poll, but I'm curious because I've been seeing food safety teams not being part of the design of an ERP system. And I'm not going to tell you ERP system, so if you don't know what that means, select 4. But I'll turn it back to Chris for running this poll question real quick.
Yeah, perfect. So was the FSQA team considered in the design of the ERP system at your company? So this is a really good question. And so Jen, one thing that I would like to point out, and you really touched on it, I'm a big nerd for analytics. I like to see all the data, and I know that a lot of times in our industry, we're always looking for more money. The quality assurance team, the supplier, quality team, it seems like there's never enough money for the goals or, the things that we want in place. And sometimes by the way of regulations, like you mentioned in your SWOT analysis, you're able to really pull out some fantastic data that you may not have been able to, necessarily access without, some of these new FSMA rules. So,
right.
I think that it's really important to always remember, good data in, good data out.
Right.
So it looks like we've got the majority of the votes here. We've got 31% yes, 21% no, our IT team handles all of this, 33% I'm not sure, and 17% of what is an ERP.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about ERP. So I will first talk about innovation in food safety technologies, which is related to ERP. So we'll cover that in a second. So some of the innovation that we have seen already in the food industry, and some of this is before FSMA went into effect, and some of it is, as Chris mentioned, some of that justification for going into, like upgrading our systems and having that reason to do it. So with FSMA and the new food safety era requiring more accessible data, there's been a lot of innovation in the space. And mainly I've seen, and that's what I was talking a lot about, inventory management systems. So WMS is warehouse management systems. And also with quality management systems. So kind of like that speaking back and forth technology. And I mentioned before blockchain or something similar that provides secure and transparent traceability solutions. And then you have the integrity and authenticity of food safety records being able to cross over as well. And what that does is it enhances trust amongst your consumers and stakeholders. And we'll talk about that as well at a later date, but that's another benefit of what FSMA has done, is helped us enhance that trust between us. IoT and smart sensors, and I can't think of what IoT stands for. I had to look it up. And I don't know, Chris, if you have that.
Internet of Things.
Information.
The Internet of Things.
Internet of Things. So what that is real-time monitoring, and it's been in place for a while in certain food safety or in certain food industry types of categories of food. So I know like pasteurization has had smart sensors in it for a long time, where if you drop below a certain temperature, then it will rework the product until the temperature is obtained again. If you lose pressure, things like that. Those are what smart sensors are. But now we're starting to see it as well in other forms, from doing temperature checks in warehouse facilities and alarming people. So like giving us a little bit more early detection and intervention ideas. So they've taken technology that already existed, but now they're modifying it more. I'm not on the leading edge of seeing those, so I'm sure that many of you, especially if you work with larger companies, you might have seen even more. I know at Kroger, some of the things we were working on that were really cool new technologies in the retail store that were related to smart sensors. So, that was even further because, like manufacturing, we've been doing it for a long time, but seeing it at a retail level was even more or less just a cool thing to start seeing shift. And a lot of it, again, like kind of doing the maintaining the optimal storage and transportation conditions. So it's storage and transportation, but we still have a lot of work to do in processing as well, especially with things that are batch, more batch operated and or batch mixed. Sorry, I'm seeing also, it looks like somebody might have a question coming up, so I'm excited. I'm sure Chris will check in with you and we'll answer that in a little bit. Artificial intelligence and predictive analytics are also an area that is a huge shift going on in the industry. So anticipating and preventing food safety breaches. So like identifying trends and patterns that indicate a potential food safety risk. Let's use an example that we've already lived through and think of in 2009, we had a cookie dough recall and it wasn't salmonella, it was E. coli. And at the time, that was something that was so new to our industry. We'd never seen E. coli associated with flour. It ended up being with flour. So anticipating and seeing those things, some of that AI and predictive analytics that the FDA is applying to their technology, we should be taking advantage of that as well and looking for those types of opportunity to see like what's trending in our raw materials, what's trending in the countries that we're purchasing products from, and then be able to identify those so that we can say, is there a risk? Do we need to do anything? And then it improves our decision-making skills around risk management abilities. And again, I mentioned these are not all the only solutions. So let's go into what is ERP. So it's Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. And when I asked earlier about was your food safety quality team part of that, because food safety is overlapped with a lot of these areas. And so an example of an enterprise, so these are components that I have on the screen. These are components of an enterprise resource system, and not all companies have it. They might have a blend of them, of different types of programs. But an example you might have seen or heard in your conversations, especially in the larger companies, it would be SAP or Oracle ERP or Microsoft Dynamics, Infor. And the key features of an ERP system are inventory management, production planning, supply chain management, finance and accounting, and HR. And so they're kind of looking at all the different major components of your company and how to operate them. So like as a small company that as small as Safe Food and Root is, like we're a food safety consulting company, our business model is a small team that has a larger outsourced network of advisors that help us do our work. We still have our own ERP system. It's called Zoho One, and that helps us be able to manage a lot of the things that are associated with our business. So I won't go through every single one, but I did spell out what each acronym means so that you have that at least. And I'll just kind of give some of the examples of them to see if those ring a bell with you. So like in the MES manufacturing system, you might see Simmons or Somatic IT, Rockwell Automation, Factory Talk. And those key features are real-time production monitoring, work order management, quality control, traceability, and some downtime tracking. In QMS, and I hope a lot of you have QMS systems already. Based on the audience, there's a lot of people in the food safety quality systems here. So you probably have a lot of different QMS systems that you've been exposed to. And really what the key features of quality management systems is doing document control, doing corrective and preventive actions, audit management, compliance management, non-conformance tracking. Sometimes you'll see spec management in there, sometimes you won't, but there's another place for that as well. Supply chain management is one of my favorite areas just because of my background, and there are a ton of examples, but a lot of that is the relationship, to and from, like to and from the suppliers. So it's supplier management, demand planning, sometimes inventory control, logistics, and transportation management. But I also look at it as a way to communicate compliance for suppliers as well. So there's opportunity there for that. CRM, more on the sales side. You've probably heard of Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics. I call out Zoho CRM because we use Zoho, but there's also like HubSpot and things like that. Those key features are customer data management and sales tracking. So again, I'm not going to go through each one, but I just want to kind of, give you a high level, like these are some examples of what can be in an ERP system and how they can all be interactive. So it's really, what I do want to show you is how incorporating the food safety team into them can significantly enhance the ability of a food manufacturing company to manage FSMA compliance, and it also ensure quality and respond swiftly to food safety issues. So again, just a few examples of how you can overlay food safety into them, like the warehouse management system. You can do the first in, first out kind of rule, product hold programs, positive release systems, lot codes, traceability, FSMA 204 management, allergen management, even on the, where you store items. The QMS and laboratory information management system can be a lot of document version control, HACCP, food safety plans, raw material specifications, in-process goods and finished product testing. Supply chain management, I mentioned that earlier. You can do supplier key performance indicators in there, so your KPI metrics. You could do food safety compliance for preventive controls. You could do approved supplier list for FSVP. Manufacturing execution systems. I look like I trailed off here, but formula management was one of the things that I mentioned there. But there's a lot of other areas you can do. Human resources systems, you could use those for managing all your training and your onboarding and the documentation and security checks, which all are related to preventive controls and some of the FSMA mandates, like I mentioned before, making sure that people are trained in your facility. And then computerized maintenance management systems, you can run, again, I kind of trailed off. I can tell my thoughts were all over the place on these. I was trying to look for all these various examples. But you could do, so the computerized maintenance management system is what a maintenance department might use. And you could do your sanitation and preventive maintenance programs through those types of systems. I've seen that so many times where you use their scheduling system to be able to do PMs and your standard, like your master sanitation schedules and things like that. Okay, back to the poll question. So I'll turn it to Chris and ask, do you have food safety systems built into your ERP?
Perfect, here we go. So next poll question. And then we'll give everyone here, a good 30 seconds or so to answer this. Jennifer, one thing also that you mentioned on some of those modules, or, kind of depending on which software company you're talking to, but, the traceability aspect is so important. In fact, now we've seen the recent legislation for California Prop 12 for animal confinement, where, they essentially encourage you to put something into place, to just be able to track and trace, prevent commingling, things like that. So we're starting to see a lot of products, organic is the same way with traceability, that are really almost demanding, that you start investing in software. So
yeah, it's nearly impossible to manage that on paper. The larger a company gets, the more raw materials you might have, the more formulations you might have, and the endless possibility of combinations of those. And you might have multiple suppliers that provide the same product. It is so important to have some type of data management solution to be able to do that and get it in digital form, if nothing else, for the automation that you can get out of it. And I've lived that the entire existence of Safe Food and Root, but also while I was working at Kroger as well, because I was managing up to 12,000 companies at Kroger. And, to be able to obtain data around 12,000 companies, you really can't be emailing each one individually. And I was for a while, because that's just what we had and where our systems were. But that's not sustainable long-term for one person to email 12,000 companies. It's not sustainable for one person to email 50 companies for multiple pieces of documentation from them.
Yeah,
And so
and I also think it's important that we remember, and our customers, the people on the call, remember that when you're getting, maybe emails from your clients that you're supplying a raw ingredient to, or supplying maybe a finished product to, and they're asking you to, update a portal with all of this new information. I've had some folks that reached out to me almost offended that, hey, we've been doing business for this long, and now they want these things that maybe they haven't asked for before. Are we doing something wrong? And it's like, well, as the automation grows in our industry, more people, like you mentioned, your role at Kroger, are using these automated systems to gather all of this data, for them. And, they don't know about your long-standing relationship with the company or your excellent GFSI scores. It's more of just procurement team, checks and balances that we've got to collect this data. So let me share the poll results really quickly. We've got 16% with yes, and it's very robust. 48% yes, but still not integrating with other programs. We've got 20% no, we're still doing everything on paper, and 16% I'm not sure.
Okay, good deal.
Perfect.
Well, again, you said 47% still on paper, did you not?
No, 48% yes, but not integrated, and 20 on paper, 20%.
20% on paper. Hey, we're improving on paper, at least with our current audience. So Chris and I kind of, we share this constantly, that a lot of people are still on paper, and for a long time it was about 50% of our audience was still on paper. So it was it's nice to see that things are improving. We should be shifting, and that's a lot of what the FDA is trying to do, is get us off paper so that we can have that faster reactive time to things. And so that's where I mentioned earlier, building consumer trust. So FSMA is pushing us to try to get that consumer trust as well. And it's a huge ordeal and a huge initiative, and it's also, it's nearly impossible, right? So it's really hard to gain 100% trust from our consumers. But, with better record accessibility, you have increased transparency and consumer trust there. Publicly accessible records are now helping people understand the company commitments. And then there's transparency and safety practices through, and that helps with brand, all of that helps with brand loyalty and confidence. So it's still a very justified direction to go to digitize. So it's not just, I got to follow the regulations, but this also does help with that consumer trust and building your brand. There's enhanced label requirements now. If you weren't aware, you need to talk to us because those have, your label requirements have changed. And consumers have more detailed product information now because of that. It's supposed to help with clear and accurate labeling, which helps people make informed choices. And a big one, and it wasn't really part of FSMA, but it was the new rule of, restaurants having to put calorie information on various products, depending on how big the company was. And so you probably have noticed a shift in, like, how many calories is this dish? And some of these dishes on our, that we normally order, even from a company like Applebee's, you order a salad and it's 1,200 calories or 2,000 calories. That's your entire daily quota for a lot of people. Or, like, depending on your size, that still is a good, like, 3/4 of what you should be eating on a daily basis. And so it's now giving us that informed opportunity to live a healthier life. Again, that builds consumer trust because it encourages also responsible consumption. And then, there's the third-party program and the accreditation that I mentioned as part of the list of rules and programs that are there. third party, you know, it has its ups and downs. It has good and bad qualities to it, but, you know, overall, it gives this verification that helps companies know at least somebody has looked at this facility in an unbiased way to make sure that they have good food safety practices. And that's, I've mentioned it in past, you know, in past presentations here at Perry Johnson and many others. That's a lot of why GFSI has been one of the trusted accreditation. So this is a benchmark accreditation, and there's several different audit certifications that you can get that meet the GFSI requirements. But it's a lot of why wholesalers and resellers like it, because it's unbiased assessments done by you know, an independent party other than the two that are involved. So you know, the customer, and it might be biased, and I say customer like the retailers, the wholesalers, and you know, doing your own internal audit is also very biased. You're going to have blinders on things. So bringing in that third party to see it, that is not regulatory, but somebody that can speak to it, like these are the programs and the standards you need to meet. And then that independent verification strengthens, again, that credibility and that consumer trust. So all of this really helps build consumer trust and making it a little bit better. Also, FSMA, when it was worked on, it was aligning to the World Health Organization standards a little bit more. So it's also you know, enhancing and fostering international cooperation in the food safety, which helps with collaborating more with the World Health Organization and promoting the adoption of globally recognized safety practices. So now it's not just US saying it, we're trying to, like, we're kind of having a relationship here where we're being able to influence their choices and what they push to the rest of the world as well. And then that also supports a unified approach to food safety across all countries. So by participating in World Health Organization and having some of that, we're seeing some of that harmonized effort in the food industry. It's encouraging recognition of other globally recognized food safety standards across those countries, as I mentioned. And GFSI talks about how that actually improves global food safety, which, you know, if you have harmonized food safety standards and you are all targeting similar things and implementing those programs, then you would like to see that effect. And then consistent food safety practices protecting consumer and promoting global health. And foreign suppliers comply to these FSMA requirements to access the US market. Thus, that also raises up the global awareness and encouraging higher standards and those third-party certifications as well. I will take a quick moment just to make sure that we look at GFSI. These are the recognized schemes. This might be actually out of date. There might be a couple more, and I did see one that lost their certification. So, but if you go to mygfsi.com, you will find any of the ones that do have those schemes. And as I mentioned, the advantage of having one of these schemes is that the company must prove to the audit body and the audit scheme owner that they have adequately addressed any non-conformances. And that is one of the reasons that there's a lot of trust in the wholesaler and retailer space, as well as at Safe Food and Root. We put a lot of weight into, if you have met these requirements and you have scored well and you have a certification, then we know that you've done enough to manage those. Okay, so let's one more time tie it all up, put a little ribbon on it about food safety culture. Again, enhancing food safety culture. I'm sorry, I'm talking about FSMA. So we're enhancing food safety culture. We are getting operational efficiencies and waste reduction, innovation in food safety technologies, building consumer trust and confidence, and then we're also getting that global food safety harmonization. And just to reiterate that definition again of food safety culture, this is beliefs, social forms, and material traits of the workplace that share attitudes, values, goals, and practices that support food safety. These set of food safety driven values are in place in every practice of the company and are an integrated pattern for all employees. So one more time, we'll talk a little bit about operations. You know, just like FSMA, Safe Food and Root is also more than a food safety consulting company. And we offer the run like clockwork certified system. We are still building this, but the reason I bring up operations and efficiencies is because the more we dive into our clients' programs, we find that most companies that are in that small and mid stage of their journey need structure and standardization, and they need food safety to be built into the core values of their company. So the food safety quality team is just as valuable as the processes, but also just the processes across the entire organization. So we became Clockwork certified coaching partner last year so that we could have an easy approach to coach our clients to focus on their visions, all the way to the specific standard operating procedures that achieve their vision and a food safety culture. So we felt like that combination helped. Our goal is to use this method and assist companies with writing their food safety quality programs while identifying ways to integrate the programs faster and easier in a digitized method. It's a long-term goal of ours to do this along with the SaaS solutions. And so while we're still working on through how we will be operating this program, we will update a lot of people on our mailing list. But if you are interested in learning more, we have a private poll next. You are more than welcome to let us know if you are interested in getting early bird pricing when we do launch that program. Hopefully it'll be later this year as we are starting to develop it. So Chris has popped that poll up for us.
Yeah, perfect. And thanks so much for such a wonderful presentation today, Jen.
Sure.
You know, one of the things that you and I, you know, always follow, I know I see you're very active on social media anytime there's a recall. You know, obviously this year has been a very rocky start for our industry. We're seeing, you know, just seems like new recalls every week. Do you think, or I guess, have you determined that a lot of this is coming from, excuse me, that a lot of this is coming from things like the new labeling requirements, or, you know, are you just seeing the issues really kind of spread out, you know, amongst a variety of things?
Yeah, I think it's still spread out across a variety of things, right? So I think the labeling requirements are a little bit a part of it. Allergens still play such a big role, and undeclared allergens. I can't tell you how many recalls I see come across my desk of undeclared egg, undeclared wheat, where it's just a miss. And it's sometimes a preventable miss. But I think too, maybe foreign companies don't understand US requirements. And so that kind of plays a part in it. And then you know, we still have seen so many different detection methods of different types of chemicals. Chemicals were trending quite a bit at the beginning of the year, and I think we're still looking a little bit at heavy metals as well trending. So I'm seeing both of those, but those are detection, right? Or a raw material supplier detected it, and then it's starting to influence down the supply chain. So I don't know if I have a great answer to both of the like that full question, but only because I haven't studied it fully, but those are just my gut feelings, like first inclination of it. So I do, and I mentioned that poll before. So one of the things with the World Health Organization, we just did there was a World Food Safety Day on June 7th that's held annually. And this year's theme was food safety is everyone's business. So it really reiterates how the global harmonization is happening between FSMA and World Health Organization. And there were 5 calls to action on the World Food Safety Day. So ensure it's safe, which meant governments must ensure safe and nutritious food for all. I think that's very effective. FSMA obviously is working on doing that. Grow it safe. Agriculture and food producers need to adopt good practices. Again, FSMA oriented, right? So that's one of our focuses at the manufacturing level. Keep it safe, as business operators must make sure food is safe. So again, retailers, the wholesalers, anyone in the supply chain, packing, handling, holding, has to have some type of program in place that is related to those 10 rules and 5 programs. And so keeping it safe, a lot of that's temperature control and monitoring. Know what's safe. Consumers need to learn about safe and healthy food. So we need to be educating our consumers. That's some of the label, right? Is consumers and managing it on the label, and then team up for food safety. So let's work together for safe food and good health. I just wanted to end on that note because I posted it last week about it. Everybody's posting about World Food Safety Day last week, but what I will say is I feel like it's not a celebration. This is an awareness building tool, because we're not celebrating World Food Safety, because we are still like 1 in 10 people in the world are getting sick from eating a meal. So it's not something that we need to be lighthearted about and be like, happy World Food Safety Day. I don't feel like it's happy to celebrate that 1 in 10 people still get sick. It's frightening. In the US, we still have 3,000 people dying after eating something that with an associated illness. And that's annually. So that's also frightening. A dear friend of mine that I look very, mentor, a guy that I look up to is Dr. Detweiler, and he lost his son, and that was in the 90s. So like 30 years of 3,000 people, and our statistics haven't changed. So that's 90,000 people that have died from food safety, foodborne illnesses that should have been preventable. So we still have a lot of work to do, and I don't want to celebrate World Food Safety Day. I want people to be aware that we are not in this alone. It's everybody's business. So our contact information's up. I know it's 201. I didn't see any questions. Chris, did you see any questions that you saw that we didn't discuss?
No, actually, we had a really good audience today, but no poll question, or excuse me, no questions. So with that, we'll finish up for today and be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for, another wonderful presentation, Jennifer. I know we've got you back next month. So, please check your boxes when the invites start going out so you can get registered for our next monthly meeting. With that, everyone, have a great afternoon. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you guys and Perry Johnson Group. We really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.